Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, have you ever wanted to live a life without shoulds? As the expression goes, don't should on me. And, we should on ourselves, we should on each other. What would a life be without shoulds? Another way of saying that is without obligations. We do need obligations, in my view. And there are obligations and there are obligations. So how can we discern, how can we discriminate between shoulds in our lives that are hurting us and shoulds that are helping us, if you want to look at it that way? And what do you think, Marcia Meislin? And before you answer, I want everyone to know, I'd like you to meet Marcia Meislin. She's been on Just Relationships several times before. I just keep inviting her back. And she wrote a memoir called The Goodbye Cookie, which is about never giving up. So never give up, Marcia Meislin, and don't should on yourself. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So tell us your evolution. You are one of the most evolved people I know. And, I loved your memoir, The Goodbye Cookie. Just tell us where you are in life and what your philosophy is, what you've learned.
Thank you. Well, I'm proud to say that I'm a 65-year-old who's just kicking my way through life in a sort of chorus line of happiness and joy. And a lot of my friends my age are, I have two groups, let's just say. There are the ones that say, oh my God, I'm getting so old. Look at me, look at my wrinkles, look at my body's sagging. I can't move the way I used to move. So that's one part of my circle. And the other part says, wow, let's just engage in wise aging, or let's say joyous aging. Wise aging is the name of a group that I'm part of, but I like to call it joyous aging. And, the old joke, which is, yes, what's the alternative? So if I weren't 65, I wouldn't be alive. And so I'm here. I'm trying to embrace every moment. 2020. Do I need to tell somebody about 2020? But anyway, it's a rough time, but I'm trying to just keep looking at what's beautiful about it, what's growthful about it, what's hard. And it doesn't even have to be a year. It could be a period of time in my life, and just look at it and rejigger how I view the world.
Wow. I even like the formation of the question. It's what? It's not, could there be anything beautiful about 2020? But what's beautiful? It kind of brings us to a certain intentionality. And I do believe that living with intentionality is a big factor in all of this. And I'm thinking about Martin Seligman's one of his many books called Learned Optimism, which is around the fact that the brain itself has a negative bias, and we're hardwired to survive. We have to pay attention to the negative. That's the threat. That's what kills us. So we have to counteract that with the intentional living. What do I choose? So what's beautiful about 2020? What's growthful about it? I just love that. And I think it would be a good idea for everyone to get in the habit of asking questions that way.
Great. Well, I sort of put my life into three categories: physical, emotional, and spiritual, and also mental. But so when I look at this year, or hard times in general, But I'll just speak to right now. I'll speak to today. So when I look at it from a physical standpoint, 9 months ago, I, like the rest of the world, sort of had to shelter down, hunker down, and stay in my house way more often than I ever have. I'm an get up and go kind of person, but the only place I got up and went is from my bedroom to my Zoom room, which is my office, to my kitchen, to my living room, outdoors a little bit. So not being able to move in the way that I wanted to and feeling a little restricted, I decided to make it a full frontal physical experience of health. So I doubled down on my exercise, and as always, I had to pick exercise that was fun for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. And so the most fun for me, for example, was dancing. So I just started dancing more often. And I have a dance teacher who's my personal trainer. And I just started moving and enjoying movement and looking at myself on Zoom, which I don't typically do, but just staring at myself as I was moving my body and saying, this body has been through so much.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as I wrote in my book, I went from 300 pounds to half of that. I've gained a few pounds since, so I'm almost half of what I was. And I just had to thank my arms and my legs and my torso and my shoulders and my knees and all of that for bringing me through life to the point where I am right now. And I really spent a lot of time during these last 9 months saying, okay, how can I appreciate and support and honor each part of my body that has been significant in getting me to where I am? And then physically also, food-wise, I was a binge eater, and that's what my memoir was about: sneak eating, binge eating, emotional eating, and numbing myself with food, being a food addict, a carbohydrate addict. And I just decided if I'm going to be in, I may as well be healthy. First of all, it will make me less vulnerable to the pandemic. And secondly, healthy is fun. So I found a way to bring myself into the kitchen to cook, which has never been my thing till now. I just decided this is the time. If you're ever going to learn to cook in your life, this is the time. And so I've been learning to cook and roast vegetables and do fun things. And so that's the physical piece. And then the emotional piece is, it's amazing to me that globally, we're all in this together. We really are. We are all in this together. And I'm such a spiritual, global kind of soul, at least deep inside, even if I haven't always known what to do with that piece. But deep inside, I feel so connected to the rest of the world, and we're in this together, and we have joy together, and we suffer together. And so I've felt, even though the irony of isolation is that I've actually felt more connected, and not just to my own friends or my own Zoom group or my own book club or whatever it is, but to other countries and other far places on the planet. So there's that, that's more the spiritual piece. And I guess the emotional piece is it's okay to have ups and downs. It's okay. This is the permission, the should part. I should wake up every day with a positive attitude because that's who I am. But some days I don't feel that. So if I wake up and I don't feel that, and it takes me 2 hours to get out of bed rather than my 5-minute jump out of bed, start doing my day, that's okay. Some days that's okay. And I need to be really gentle with myself. But I used to be afraid that if I were gentle with myself and I didn't honor all the many shoulds that I have in my brain.
Honor the should, yeah.
Honor the shoulds. That I would, to use the expression from my mother's generation, that I would let myself go. If I didn't have enough shoulds, I would be way too loose on myself.
Okay.
And so there's a piece of that that's helpful. And then there's a piece of that that's just too much pressure. And so I had to find the balance. And I have to say, on a daily basis, there's a little bit of a balance that I'm always looking for.
Wow. What a beautiful treatise. There is another book coming, Marcia Meislin. Oh my word. You know, you're such a wordsmith. You're so smart. I have such smart friends. Just the idea of putting all this into words, you have the isolation and you have the connection and the absolute irony of that. And when you talk about global awareness, I was just thinking to myself, global comrades. You know, it's even more than global citizens, global comrades. And it is very comforting. And for I myself, I no longer suffer from FOMO, you know, fear of missing out. And you look at Facebook and you say, oh my goodness, everyone else is having such a ball. And what about little me? So it's just, I never realized what fun it would be to just hang out and do nothing on a Saturday night. Well, so is everyone else. I always had to go out on a Saturday night. That was what you did. Talk about mother's generation. You went out on a Saturday night. And so there's such a freedom in not having to follow the old shoulds, because the old shoulds are no longer shoulding. I mean, there's nothing there that you can do anyway. It's like we've all been sent to our rooms. So what do you do? You know, what do you do when you've been sent to your room? Well, what you do, Marcia Meislin, is you dance, and you have to go into the kitchen to cook. But you don't eat, as in binge eating, right? You cook delicious, nutritious foods, as I do, and you and I both love our Instapots. And so there's always an evolution with you, and I hope there's an evolution with other people. It is part of the language now. Everyone talks about COVID, the lockdown. Everyone talks about, the yay and the nay. I think that people are really recognizing the silver lining here. Certainly the obvious, like not having to rush around and commute and get all dressed up every day when you just have to dress up from the waist up, if that. That sort of thing. So you also talked about the mental. Did you want to say anything about that? The physical, the emotional, the spiritual,
yes, and the mental. So I'm a doer. I love to do. I love to be doing things and growing and learning. I don't relax as well as I could. So for me, during these 9 months, I had always wanted to learn Spanish. And a friend said to me early on in COVID, I'm so bored. What can I do? I said, well, I'm going to look for courses in Spanish. And she said, let's do it together. So she and I, twice a week, March, have spent an hour, so 2 hours a week with an app. And we're sort of teaching ourselves Spanish. And I'm now at the point where I can actually, have a limited conversation in Spanish. And even when we were in the summer, we used to take walks 6 feet apart, masked, and talk in Spanish about anti-racism and what's going on in the world.
Wow, you're kidding me.
And these are impossible words in a new language. But we had our Google Translate, and we would walk, and one of us would stumble along trying to have a conversation and really think things through, not just in our own language, which is maybe a trap, talking about things in a language that we're so used to. So having to come up with the right words in another language that is totally new to us is it's a whole experience beyond just learning a language. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of breaking ideas down into their simplest terms so you can find the words. So that's just one thing. And so besides taking Spanish and dancing and learning how to cook, I've also taken some classes. I'm part of a group called Wise Aging, and there are about 9 women who meet every other Wednesday, and we pick a topic. We did follow a curriculum for a while, and then we finished the curriculum, and we pick a topic that has to do with the effect that something has on our aging. So, for example, something very relevant to what you and I are talking about, Duffy, is one of the topics was habits and what happens to our habits as we get older. And so I have to say, I've gotten over some really horrible habits, like rushing to the kitchen every time I get a little frustrated or bored or disappointed. But I've also developed some new habits, which aren't so great, like sitting on Zoom. And to be honest, I'm just sometimes picking on my skin and, you know, just doing things that are not the best habits. So one of the women in our group sent around an article about habits, and I applied it to aging. And the notion about habits was that people developed habits from the beginning of time because it kept us safe. If we didn't have the habit of waking up when the sun came out and going to get our food before the predators got to us, then we wouldn't have survived. So there's so many habits and routines and disciplines that we have developed over time that are really hardwired into us because it kept us alive and it kept us surviving. So when we look at habits and we say, oh, it takes, I don't know, different theories, 48 days, 60 days, 2 weeks, 6 months, whatever it is to break a habit or to form a new habit, I don't exactly know how much that is for me, but I do know that I've been so much more aware of my routines and my habits during this period of time. And you asked about the mental. So I've been kind of studying my own habits. And interestingly enough, my husband and I wake up pretty much every day at the same time. And one of us makes our way into the kitchen and makes coffee for the other. To be fair, usually he's making me coffee because he's much better at it than I am, and he likes his own coffee better. And then I go down and I pull out his cereal, I pull out my cereal. Anyway, we have this routine that we never had before because we would wake up at different times. We're both retired now, but he would go to work. I would go to work. I would go running here. He would go running there. We would eat breakfast at different times. We never sat down and had a cup of coffee together per se. Sometimes we did, but it wasn't a habit. And I've never been in the place where I would actually have an entire conversation about coffee. How's the coffee? How do you like the beans? Did you add more water, less water? And I'm sitting there going, how boring can I be that I'm spending the beginning of my day talking about coffee or how did you sleep? And Duffy, you've known me for a long time. I skip the small talk and go right to the deepest questions. So I'd rather wake up and say to my husband, oh, what's on your mind today? What do you dream about? What's your vision? And he's like, no, we're not doing this.
I like the coffee. I'm enjoying my coffee. Keep quiet, Marcia.
Exactly. And so I've had to get into some routines that are life-saving, if you will, that are relationship building, that are humbling, and also that teach me how to be right-sized, to use that expression, because I just want to go for the big and the grandiose. And how do you feel about the fact that the entire world is connected together with this pandemic? And he's like, let's talk about the coffee beans. So I'm changing in so many big and little ways during this period of time to recognize the simple things in life. Somebody once bought me a subscription to a magazine. I guess it was called something like Simple Things or whatever, Real Simple. And I'm like, I read that magazine for about a year when I had the subscription. I'm like, really? Is this what people talk about? These simple things? And now as I get older and as I'm dealing with things in a new way, because this pandemic has really forced me to reevaluate my values, my process, my shoulds, all of that. I'm saying, oh my gosh, there's such a beauty in simple things. I don't have to be changing the world first thing when I wake up. And anyway, I don't have the power to change the world. I do have a little bit more power to change me. And I also can recognize that I can have an impact in the world, and I have to have an impact in the world. That's just who I am. And the world has an impact on me, but I don't have the answers. I mean, I really, really learned through politics and through racial injustice issues that I only now became much more aware of. And I can do what I can do. And sometimes the thing that's most important for me to do is to taste the coffee and not have everything else on my mind.
And isn't that expression, stop and smell the coffee? Right? Stop and smell the coffee, stop and smell the roses.
Right.
There's so much here that you've said, Marcia Meislin, author of The Goodbye Cookie. I'm just thinking negative involuntary change. We all had that initially, the 4 kinds of change: negative, positive, voluntary, involuntary. So this was the worst, the negative involuntary. And you and I, we didn't even talk about it at the time, but I immediately went into my retreat mode. Okay. So I am declaring myself on a retreat, a holistic, healthy, spiritual retreat. I'm going to spend more time meditating, which I didn't very much, but I'm going to spend more time exercising, which I did. And I found a wonderful group called Vitality Society that we have Zoom classes every single day of the week and unlimited. And not only fitness, but meditation and art. I love the art and improv. So, yes, that's a whole new thing. And for me, when you talk about change in routine, I'm reminded of how progressive architects in England create buildings and create building complexes. What they do is they, map out the buildings and they construct the buildings, but they leave the pathways unpaved, and they let the people decide where the pathways are. And only after they see that do they pave them.
I love that.
I love that, Marcia. And someone told me, and actually an architect that I met in Spain, that was telling me this. It was at least 25 years ago. And I just thought that was so brilliant. And I love the truth of it, and I love the metaphor of it. So, yes, and we need routines because it frees up our minds to do creative things. We don't have to think, should I brush my teeth today? Should I not? We don't have to think about those kinds of things. But the creation of new routines is so huge. And when a habit doesn't work anymore, it doesn't work, even though we have, and our brains have these deeply grooved pathways, right? These dysfunctional pathways, the point of least resistance, the default pattern. And now if you're not going there, what do? Well, maybe you can put some sand in it. Maybe you can build a barrier around it as you are forging a new path. So you and I have a history of stress eating, and that we've talked about many times on the air and off the air. And I am not ashamed to say that I am a sugar addict in recovery, because we now know that what you see on the brain, a brain scan, that it has the same look if you eat sugar or you take cocaine. And that talk about physical, right, Marcia, that there is the physical component to addiction. So I personally have not had sugar for 4 years.
Wow.
And luckily for me, I had already not had it for 3 years before the COVID started. So I was in that habit already, which is so wonderful. And I was afraid that I would go back to my old default pattern in crisis, which is what people do. But I didn't, because I lived intentionally. I chose not to go there, and I didn't. And also, we have only a couple of minutes left, but I want everyone to know that this is only part one of a two-part series with author Marcia Meislin on living your life without shoulds, or choosing your shoulds, if you will. So I wanted to comment on the difference between should and could. And you had mentioned, a could. I could have done this differently. And could puts us at choice. So when I, as a psychotherapist, if a client would say to me, "Oh, Dr. Duffy, I should have done this and I should have done that," and they are just sitting in such grief and self-blaming, I will say, well, you could have done that, but I imagine you had reasons why you didn't. Their whole body and their whole face, their demeanor would just lighten up literally. Yes, I could have done it that way, and I did have reasons, and here were my reasons then, but this is now. Now is now. So living mindfully, living in the present moment, not trying to figure out the big problems in the world every moment, but living in a way that you add to the world, which I know personally you do, Marcia Meislin, that you are an influencer and you have actually a lot of spheres of influence. And everywhere you go, you bring energy and vitality and presence. And that's why I decided to keep you as my friend.
How lucky am I?
How lucky am I? How lucky am I? So until we meet again, is there anything you'd like to say about living a life without shoulds? And would you agree that there are shoulds and there are shoulds? There's obligations, and we only have a minute. We can talk about it next week.
I'm going to say something that I think we just need to be gentle with ourselves. We're all, whether it's a pandemic or not, we're so hard on ourselves. Yes. And we shame ourselves so much that our vulnerabilities sometimes keep us from being joyous and joyful and being out in the world. And if I could say, let's just free ourselves up and give ourselves permission to be okay with who we are and our past. We can't change it anyway, but we can change where we are and going forward. So let's just honor the decisions we made till now. Some were good, some not as good, and just say, okay, that got me to this point, and now I'm here, and I feel blessed and open-hearted, and let's see what comes next. And just be gentle.
Beautiful, beautiful. And is there any way we can get your book, the Goodbye Cookie?
Yes. So right now my book is available on Amazon, but it's only available in Kindle form. But I do have a few copies of my own. So maybe if people come through you, Duffy, and they want a print copy, I do have some. And
okay, good.
I have a website, marciameislin.com, and there's a lot of information on there as well.
Beautiful. MarciaMeislin.com for Marcia's book, The Goodbye Cookie, which is absolutely wonderful, as you can imagine. So I will say goodbye for now. Thank you so much, Marcia Meislin. This is Dr. Duffy Spencer, wishing you great relationships.